Hello, and welcome to University of Illinois Extension's Local Government Education Program. My name is Nancy Wodralgo. I'm a CED specialist for U of I Extension. Before I introduce our program today, I want to let participants know that at any time you should feel free to write your questions during the presentation into the chat space. Also, if you have any technical issues, please add those questions as well to the chat space, and I'll try to troubleshoot with you in the background during the presentation. I'm going to monitor the chat space and relay your questions about the presentation and about the program to our speaker, Matt, at the end of the presentation today. So our presenter today is Matt Schmidt. He's Deputy Director for Broadband within the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. He's presented on several of our webinars in the past this year because the Office of Broadband is running a very important statewide effort to extend critical high-speed internet to homes, businesses, and community anchor institutions throughout the state. The Illinois Office of Broadband recently opened the application window for their second $50 million in funding. So Matt's here to tell you help you further understand this program and the current funding round. And he's going to cover today the notice of funding and some other information about this second round of the Connect Illinois Broadband Grant Program. And we're going to have time for questions at the end of the presentation. If your question doesn't get answered, we will provide you a contact email. I'll put that in the chat box here as soon as the presentation kicks off so that you'll be able to send those emails if your question doesn't get answered at the end of the presentation. And I want to acknowledge that because of the quick rollout of the program this week, there may be folks on the call today that did not register their email with me for this particular webinar. So if you're interested in getting a copy of the slides, please send me a private message in the chat box with your email address. So we urge you all to share the recording with your colleagues, and that's going to be available at go.illinois.edu LGE archives, and I'll put that URL in the chat as well. Without further delay, I'm going to hand it over to you, Matt, and thank you for being here today to share the details of this important opportunity.
Well, thank you so much, Nancy, and thank you everybody for joining us today. And we really appreciate the chance to partner with University of Illinois Extension on this webinar series. We expect that there'll be at least one other that'll follow up in the coming weeks. But with the announcement of our round 2 NOFO earlier this week down in Staunton, we wanted to build off of the momentum for round 2 and engage you with some more detail about the round 2 NOFO for Connect Illinois. And I look forward to any questions that we may receive. Again, if we don't have an opportunity to get to all the questions during our time that we have available today, we'll certainly make available a follow-up webinar down the road. And of course, I'm always available to talk broadband. And so with that said, we'd like to make this as useful as possible here in the hour or so that we've got in front of us. I'm going to try not to put folks to sleep with my monotone. And so if I talk fast, I apologize. I just want to try to get through the content so that we do have some time for Q&A at the back end. And so one thing I'd just like to say out of the gates, though, is that all questions regarding the round 2 NOFO or the Connect Illinois Grant Program, clarity is provided in the NOFO itself, the application packet that will instruct potential applicants, and then also a FAQ document. And so I'm going to do my best to bring to life this program and our policy, but the final word is actually the written word and not what I say today. And so I just wanted to make that disclaimer just in case I were to inadvertently confuse any matters. So moving forward, I just wanted to direct folks to our Connect Illinois website. This is essentially the one-stop shop for all things Connect Illinois and Office of Broadband in the state of Illinois. And so if folks do have any questions regarding this NOFO, about our mapping, about our related programming, we've got a lot of stuff that we're doing right now, and it seems like every week that goes by, we're doing something new. And so I would encourage folks to check out our Connect Illinois website. Honest to God, the easiest way to get there is just to Google Connect Illinois Broadband, and it'll take you right there. And so again, the NOFO, the eventual application packet, mapping, FAQ documents, all available on our website. And you can see the vertical menu at the right here. We'll run through a list of options for us. So if you scroll down on that same web page and the menu will continue, you'll see some additional information. Certainly in the main text here, you'll see a link. If you want to learn more about our round 1 funding and the announcement back in June, you can click there. Likewise for the launch, you've got a link below that. But moving back to that vertical menu at right, the broadband grants header, we got round one, round two, the maps. The NOFO is linked directly to the round two tab there. So if you click on that, that'll take you to the NOFO itself. But before we get into the NOFO, I just wanted to preview what the map looks like. And so if you were to click on that map icon, it'll take you to a very familiar map. And we have Connected Nation is our broadband mapping vendor for the Illinois Office of Broadband and our Connected Illinois grant program. However, their maps will not be available for us until early 2021. And so for that reason, we are defaulting to the FCC map that is familiar to many of us. We can talk a little bit more during our time together today and moving forward. We understand this is not a perfect map. We're going to make the most of it. And we certainly welcome conversation around where service is either overstated or understated. But this is the starting point for where broadband is, where it isn't in Illinois, at least until we get our state of Illinois broadband specific mapping from Connected Nation here in the next couple of months. So now, if you were to go back to the Connect Illinois website and click on round two, it'll take you to our NOFO, our Notice of Funding Opportunity. And on this page, you've got a lot of information spelled out for you. At the bottom, if you scroll down, you'll see the Connect Illinois Broadband Grant Program NOFO. It's a PDF. If you click there, the NOFO opens up. And so once you click open that NOFO, you'll get a better understanding of what we're talking about, what we're proposing here with round two. And so the slides that follow essentially are a lot of the information that's included in the NOFO, not necessarily verbatim, but much of it populates the slides ahead here. And so that's the goal of today, is to kind of run through this NOFO. I'm not going to read things word by word, but the point is I just want to familiarize you with what we're trying to communicate in this NOFO. And so as was the case with round one, we have up to $50 million available for round two. A maximum grant amount of $5 million is available per project. The application period will officially open on November 1. That is the date that we will be posting our application packet and related materials. And so this is just the beginning of the conversation around round two. And we have a fairly lengthy application window here. We have a deadline of March 1, 2021. We don't anticipate adjusting that. I think that that's something that we'd like to stick with, but we are giving applicants a little bit more time. Of course, we've got the holidays in here, and then we also have a lot of work at the national level here. And so we understand that our broadband providers may be staying busy here this time of year. And so we want to give folks an opportunity both on the front end of the FCC RDOF auction and the back end of that auction to spend some time on Connect Illinois round two. And so I think a couple pieces that we just want to emphasize for folks: if you're interested in applying, make sure that you get GATA pre-qualified. The Grants Accountability and Transparency Act, GATA, that's a key first step for any grantee to be able to receive a grant from the state of Illinois. And then in order to prepare a grant application successfully, yes, of course, read this NOFO carefully. Let us know if you have any questions, and then be responsive to what we're asking for in it. And so we'll try to lay out as best we can through the NOFO and the related application packet and materials what a successful application looks like and the sorts of things that we're expecting of our applicants. So the next slide here talks a little bit about, I think ways of submitting the application. In round one, we received all submissions electronically, but if for some reason an applicant did want to submit with a paper copy, you can. We're leaving that as an option for folks if need be. But the broadband@illinois.gov is our email address, and it is the best place to get a hold of us if you've got any questions regarding our Connect Illinois grant program. And likewise, we've got some contact information at the bottom. Our Office of Broadband is available at that number. And again, that email address. Any questions regarding this program or anything that we do at the Illinois Office of Broadband can be found there. And then you can also see our web address. So quick moment here to talk about our program description. So Connect Illinois is the nation's largest competitive matching grant program on broadband ever. At $400 million, we are looking to use multiple rounds of this competitive matching grant approach to do what no other state or federal program has done today, and that's accomplish ubiquitous broadband access for homes, businesses, community anchor institutions in every corner of the state. And so this is an undertaking that began in earnest in 2020 and will continue in the years ahead. And of course, we've got round 2 in front of us today. And one thing that I like to stress is, our goal is not simply to connect the unconnected, but also to make sure that we're doing everything that we can along the way to promote economic development and competitiveness and push new uses in telework or remote learning or precision agriculture. And so we take that kind of work really seriously. And I think this is particularly true in the pandemic. We want to make sure that folks don't simply have access to broadband, but that we're putting our communities and our economy in the best position possible to recover and rebound in the months and years ahead. So another word on the funding information. I already talked about this being the largest grant program in the country, $400 million. We do have a match requirement generally of 50% or more of eligible project costs. We'll get into a little bit more detail about that, but that's why we call it a matching grant program. And the work that would be funded in round 2 is expected to be, or required to be, completed by June 30th of 2024. As we've seen in round 1, I think there's the expectation that many of the projects will finish well ahead of the 3-year horizon that we, or timeline that we give them to be completed. That being said, we understand that there's a backlog on fiber and that there are some requirements that our grantees need to work through. And so we do give a full 3 years with the understanding that we're hoping folks get that work done sooner than that. And so on to the next slide here. We just want to emphasize in this slide that the release of this NOFO does not obligate the department to make an award. There's the potential that we might update the NOFO. So keep an eye out for a potential 2.0 version. We don't anticipate doing that, but if there is an egregious error or something that we need to further clarify in the NOFO, there may be an update to this document. So eligibility information here. I had mentioned earlier that you have to, as an applicant, be GATA pre-qualified. And so if you have any questions about that process, let us know earlier. Don't wait until the application deadline to be looking at that. That's something that we really want to try to address as quick as we can. And in particular, to be GATA pre-qualified and to put yourself in a position to be a successful applicant, we want to make sure all of these bullets below, I'm not going to read through all of them, but that you're in good standing on all of those fronts. And moving forward to the next slide here, the eligible applicants, you could be an incorporated business or a partnership, a broadband provider, political subdivision like a local unit of government, nonprofit organization, a rural cooperative, for instance, or cooperative association, or an LLC organized for the purpose of expanding broadband access, so a provider. We have a pretty inclusive list of eligible applicants. We think that that's important to make this program successful. And so we encourage all applicants that have a proven track record of doing this kind of work to consider Connect Illinois Round 2. In terms of eligible project areas, this is a little wrinkle that we've added here in round 2 here. And we have eligible projects, as it should say, is applications can be classified under one of 4 categories: broadband access for Illinois homes, businesses, community anchor institutions in unserved or underserved areas, very similar to round 1. We have a new category, broadband equity, and that's for those projects that have a demonstrable need where project economics or residential socioeconomic factors such as poverty, unemployment, or broadband adoption rates make a strong case for an exemption to that 50% non-state match. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the presentation here today, but that's a new category for round 2. Similar categories: broadband innovation for economic development and related applications, and urban broadband for access, equity, and innovation in qualified Illinois cities or metro areas of 75,000 residents or more. And so those are the 4 categories. We'll talk a little bit more about this in the slides ahead. In terms of the eligible project areas, we have defined Illinois as either being unserved, served, or underserved. And the unserved and underserved areas are those areas in Illinois that are eligible for funding. And essentially, those are areas that lie below the 100 by 20 megabit per second threshold. So we define an unserved area is those that lie below 25 by 3. An underserved area is those below 100 by 20. And again, we previewed the the map that we have available based upon FCC data that is posted on our website. That's the start of that conversation about whether or not an area is eligible if it's unserved or underserved. But if a potential applicant looks at that map and says, hey, this map isn't accurate, we want to confirm our eligibility before we think about submitting an application, the weeks ahead would be a great time to have that conversation. All right, moving along here, in terms of the eligible program costs, again, we are building broadband infrastructure here. So this is essentially network expansion that's focused on last mile or middle mile network deployment. And so costs that can be included: network design, project planning, obtaining construction permits, construction of facilities, of course, the middle mile or last mile infrastructure, and then durable equipment, because this is bond-backed funding, or the installation and testing of the broadband service. And in terms of the cost sharing, yes, this is a matching grant program. So we are expecting for projects that are in the broadband access, broadband innovation, or urban broadband categories, that at least a 50% non-state match is provided with an application, and that we will be awarding bonus points for those applications that provide at least 55% non-state match regarding total eligible costs. However, as I had mentioned a couple slides back, there is an exception category here for broadband equity, where perhaps the adoption rates are such that the business case just doesn't pan out for a 50-50 match. And so we will make an exception to that, that 50% non-state match requirement in areas where there's a clear argument that either the project economics don't work, or that there's a strong case that the socioeconomic factors may limit adoption, for instance. And so this is a wrinkle, and this is a point of conversation that we will flesh out more in our application packet and related materials that we'll be posting by November 1. But we just wanted to make that clear here in the NOFA in the conversation today. We see this as you know, I think given the pandemic and challenges that we see in certain parts of the state, it's an important wrinkle to introduce into our grant program. But I don't want to give any of our potential applicants, you know, the sense that this is not still predominantly a matching grant program. By far and away, we are expecting that all of our applications will include at least a 50% non-state match. All right, and because this is an infrastructure grant program that's backed by bonds, indirect costs do not apply here, are not eligible to be included in budgets. And then I wanted to spend a little bit of time regarding requirements. This is, of course, a state of Illinois grant program, and with that comes the expectation that you meet a number of requirements of our applicants and of our grantees. And one is the business enterprise program for female or minority-owned businesses in particular. And we work very closely with the Illinois Capital Board to help our grantees understand the BET program and to be compliant with that. I want to just mention this is a serious requirement. It's goals of which are established, and we strive to meet those goals. But there's a conversation about the extent to which BEP goals can be met in certain parts of the state. And so that's something that we want to stress to our applicants and our grantees, that there is a conversation there, and it's not a hard and fast, take it or leave it, you must meet this goal, or you must do X, Y, or Z in order to be eligible for grants. But rather it's something that's a goal that's established, that's serious, that we want to meet. But if an applicant or a grantee does have any questions or concerns about meeting that goal, we certainly would like to facilitate a conversation with our capital board to understand how best to move forward as an applicant or a grantee. Likewise, we have environmental review requirements. These will not hold up an application or a grant agreement from being executed, but the Office of Broadband will facilitate certain environmental review and liaise with Illinois departments accordingly. That's a piece that we kind of take the lead on. And as a grantee would experience, we will be in contact with you if there's a follow-up conversation on that front. I think in Illinois, that's much more of the exception than the rule, that there would be a concern over environmental review. But nonetheless, it's a piece of the process that a grantee must go through. And then finally, and then next we have the Illinois Works Jobs program, and this deals with essentially having a supply of new workers, the next generation workers through apprenticeship programs and initiatives. And so there are requirements for our projects in this regard. And this is something that we're working through with our round one grantees now. And we can certainly spend more time talking about this or other requirements moving forward. But this is a requirement that we have of certain grantees for round one and certainly for round two. The Prevailing Wage Act applies to a majority of our work here in Connect, Illinois. And we will have additional information that we can make available either in the Q&A or a subsequent webinar. This is something that we just want to flag for folks. This is a requirement. There's not a lot of wiggle room on this. I think that there's some conversation that we can have with the Department of Labor about better understanding how the prevailing wage impacts different job classifications and work on a project. But we don't want any applicants or grantees to be taken by surprise over the requirements of the Prevailing Wage Act. Likewise, we have the Employment of Illinois Workers on Public Works Act, which was triggered because of unemployment rates following the pandemic or in connection to the pandemic. And so this is another requirement that we take seriously. However, this, like several of the others, there is a path forward for getting either an exemption or a waiver if we can demonstrate that that there's cause. And so if you're an applicant and you want to better understand how this might impact your application, we'd be happy to spend some time and make the connection with our colleagues here in DCEO to better understand how a waiver might be put forward. And if that's something an applicant would like to do ahead of applying, we can have that conversation just so an applicant has a firm understanding. And that's true with all of these requirements, whether it's prevailing wage, the Employment of Illinois Workers on Public Works Acts, the worker preference that I speak of here, environmental review, or others. We just really encourage applicants, if you are concerned about these requirements, let's have a conversation on the front end. But we do feel like there's a path forward in almost every case for these requirements to be met and for exemptions to be made where there's a strong argument. And so again, our phone lines are open. We will certainly be happy to get into specifics with potential applicants in the weeks ahead on that. And I guess the point here I should stress too is, I didn't mention this earlier, but applicants can submit multiple applications for this program. And so you are not limited to simply submitting one application for a maximum of $5 million. An applicant, and this certainly was true in round one, can submit multiple applications. And if you are competitive, you could have multiple applications funded. And that was the case in round one. We expected that very well may be the case in round two. All right, just a quick note on the application submittal information. We don't want to take for granted that everybody has access to the internet these days. After all, this is why we have this program in place. And so if you are somehow getting access to this webinar, but you would like a hard copy version of the NOFO, you can contact us by email, phone, you can send us a letter. Any of those approaches to reach us, we will be happy to turn around a hard copy of the NOFO, the application packet, and related materials to you. Otherwise, this is available online at our website, as I had mentioned earlier. And then there are a couple different ways in which you can submit applications. I had mentioned this earlier: electronically, hard copy. And for those, and we have standard formatting that the application packet will specify. But for those that do not have maybe a capability of submitting a file because of the file size, we do have an alternative means of submitting a larger file that I'll speak to in a slide ahead here. In terms of the content and form of the application, we're looking for a standard cover page, executive summary, a broadband application that speaks to the specifics of the Connect Illinois grant program that will be specified. A template will be provided in the application packet material that will be available in about a week's time. We also have a uniform grant application through the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, likewise for a uniform capital budget through the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. And so we try to align those uniform templates, if you will, as closely as possible to our grant program, so it makes sense for our applicants. And we do have some improvements on that aspect of things over round one moving into round two. And then we are also requiring of applicants a conflict of interest disclosure, other mandatory disclosures, and your W-9 forms. So just so there's no surprise there. And all this is spelled out in the NOFO and discussed in more detail in the application packet. Not going to spend a lot of time on this, but the NOFO does specify Dun & Bradstreet Universal Numbering System, the DUNS number, and SAM numbers. These are things that you've got to have in place in order to apply. And so if you're serious about applying, might be worth your time to spend a moment getting those pieces in order now versus as we approach March. And again, applications must be received on or before March 1st, 2021. This is the piece that I had mentioned earlier. Yes, electronic submission, hard copy submission, or you can submit your file through a link on the CMS data sharing portal if you have a large file and it's not getting through your email system or ours. But I should mention here that electronic submissions that include links to documents stored on the cloud are not accepted. And finally, once an applicant does submit an application, whether it's in November here or right up against the deadline on March 1, you will get a confirmation email from us at broadband@illinois.gov. And so I know this seems like a long ways off, but if you submit an application and you don't get a confirmation email, it might be worth pinging us again just to make sure that it's received. And we didn't have any issues with that in round one, but we just want to make sure if you put all this time into applying that you know that your application has been received and that it will be reviewed. All right, just a moment here regarding the review process. This is again a competitive matching grant program, so there is a merit review that applies a scoring system and scoring rubric to the application so that we're able to competitively score them one versus the next. And so what we're asking for in terms of the categories that we'll be scoring, project impact. So what kind of difference are you making, both in terms of number of new connections, whether it's to homes, businesses, community anchor institutions, farms, et cetera, and what sorts of related impact are you having on maybe economic development or telework or telehealth or precision agriculture, for instance. Secondly, the extent to which a non-state match is put forward and the demonstration of need. And so if you are proposing a deployment in an area where a 70% non-state match isn't doable, well, make the best case for why 70 isn't what you're offering and you can only get up to 65, for instance. Or if you're falling short of that 50% required non-state match, clearly demonstrate why you fit into that broadband equity category. And this would be the place that you would do that in the application. Third, community support. We want these to be community-driven applications, and to the extent that you can have these applications reflect a broad community will or vision. This includes letters of support, but it goes beyond that. We really want the community's voice to be heard in the vision incorporated into applications. Project readiness is a project that you're coming to us with in round two, ready to dig ground and make a difference for our communities around Illinois sooner rather than later. We certainly want to have projects that are ready to get going. Project viability and sustainability. Are we investing in broadband networks and connectivity that's going to stand the test of time? And is the approach that's articulated sufficient to providing communities with support over the long haul? Affordability and adoption assistance. This is something that we included in round one, but I think with the pandemic, this is doubly important. Having access doesn't just mean that there is broadband available in your area, but having affordable pricing tiers and adoption assistance so that folks have a realistic means of adopting and subscribing to service is a really important piece. And so that's something that we'll be emphasizing more in round two than in round one. And then finally, we recognize that there's been a lot of investment in broadband, and there will continue to be investment, whether it's public or private, in the years ahead. We want to do what we can to promote open access and shared use, and that your business strategy reflects, I think, the prevailing tendency towards collaboration wherever possible. And so more detail on all of those categories will be provided in the application packet, but we did want to outline them here in the NOFO today. And then in addition to the merit review that I just talked about, we also have a mapping review element. And this harkens back to the map that we spoke of earlier on. It's not perfect. There are a lot of flaws with it, both in its, I think, lack of timeliness, and it's not particularly granular. It's not particularly accurate in many cases. And so we recognize that in many circumstances, a follow-up conversation about where broadband is and where it isn't is merited. And so we welcome that conversation. And we really look forward to hearing from applicants or providers or others who have a better sense of the broadband landscape. Again, I had mentioned that we have our broadband that we're contracting for with Connected Nation that will be available in the coming months, but it's not available yet. And so we'll be relying upon FCC mapping here for round 2. And I should just mention this mapping review process does give an applicant or an incumbent provider or others the opportunity to challenge the maps and to challenge an application eligibility based upon mapping data or other data that we might consider. But that challenge process operates beyond the scope of this NOFO, and so details will be spelled out on our website as we move forward. And then a word about the selection process here. Yes, a merit review process will drive our scoring. We will be scoring categories and ranking them by category. And so we talked at the outset about broadband access, broadband equity, we have urban broadband, and we have broadband innovation. Those 4 categories. Projects will be scored and ranked within each category. However, we are not obligated to make awards in each category. And so we want to make sure that we are funding projects that we feel are of high quality, that are positioned to make a difference in our communities. But at the same time, we do want to inspire applicants to think creatively about how to come to us with ideas that include elements of innovation, address broadband equity as earlier described, maximize or optimize the number of new passings in the broadband access category, or are able to do innovative things in an urban setting where broadband needs certainly exist today. In addition to that, we will take into account geographic balance. We have 10 economic development regions in Illinois, and it is important to us that we have relative geographic balance in the projects that we're funding. We're not going to fund a project that's not ready for funding, but we do want to try to make sure that every region of the state is benefiting from the Connect Illinois grant program to the extent possible. A little bit more on the selection process. And sorry, I mentioned this in the past slide here, but yes, we have those 4 categories: access, equity, innovation, urban broadband. And so in the in the Connect Illinois application packet that will be forthcoming, more information on each of those categories. And that's something that an applicant should be thinking about on the front end. First, your project area, where you want to focus, and also which category your project might best fall under. A word here about federal funding. We really believe it's important for our Connect Illinois funding to leverage federal funding to the extent possible. And we understand that there are a lot of areas of Illinois that might require a partnership among the state, the federal government, the local community, and the provider. And so to that extent, we're introducing, I guess, our FedCelerator program here, and that's a more prescriptive approach to incorporating federal dollars as non-state match components here for round 2. And that's certainly the case with round 1 that we accepted federal dollars is a portion of non-state match. We expect to do that in round 2. And so we can certainly talk a little bit more about that in the Q&A today, and we'll be providing more information on that moving forward. And I guess here's my language that I spoke to earlier. We have those 4 categories. Release of this NOFO does not obligate us to make an award in each category. We want to inspire great ideas and innovative thinking from our applicants, but we also want to make sure that every project that we fund is truly a high quality fundable project. And so to that end, if an application falls short and engagement after round 2 scoring is complete, if that engagement is merited, we'd be happy to follow up with an unsuccessful applicant and talk about how that applicant might improve on their application for a future subsequent round. we're all in this together, and this program is only going to be successful if we get great applications. And so we want to forge that partnership with our applicants. And once they become grantees, that partnership continues. And then just a moment here, we do have an appeal process that is spelled out through the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity website. And so if folks want a better understanding of that appeal process, that process would follow a determination. I mean, we're talking months in advance or after the application deadline, of course. But if anyone's interested in knowing more about that appeal process, there is a link included here as well as in the NOFO itself. And then the last couple slides here just speak about state award notices and our NOSAs, and in the process moving forward after an applicant becomes a grantee. And so we just wanted to spell this out in the NOFO. I referenced it here just to acknowledge that it is in the NOFO. I don't think we have to spend a lot of time on that today. Finally, there is some reporting requirements that come along with a grant from the Connect Illinois program. And that's what the GATA pre-qualification and some of those steps that an applicant takes early on helps us establish is how frequent we will be asking for reports, whether it's on performance or financing from our grantees. And so just don't want anyone to be caught off guard by that. We have some requirements that operate, on the front end of our grantees regarding whether it's, prevailing wage or environmental review or business enterprise program or others. But there's also a reporting requirement on the back end. And again, the Office of Broadband is here to help our applicants, to help our grantees navigate those waters. And we all want to get to yes on all of these requirements, and certainly make sure that nobody's surprised by these expectations or the requirements. And so we're your ally to help you understand the requirements, whether you're an applicant or a grantee. And so we won't just give you a grant and walk away. We want to make sure that we're working together to do things right. And then again, monitoring and auditing continues throughout the deployment period. And so that's something, again, we wanted to point applicants and grantees to more information through our NOFO. And so with that said, we do have a little bit of time here on the back end for questions. I'm sorry I took a lot of time to get through that. I hope there's some clarity for those of you who had a chance to review this earlier. Otherwise, Nancy, do we have any questions queued up?
We do. So I'm just going to jump right into it. We have a person who says that if our electric co-op received a grant in round 1, can we apply for round 2? And she wanted to also include that the co-op does supply their broadband.
Yeah, so I think the key here is an applicant or a grantee for round 1 certainly can come back to us for round 2. However, we are not going to fund the same area of Illinois twice. And so the map of eligible areas does change based upon private investment and grants that we're seeing the Connect Illinois program make, or federal dollars that are coming in. And so we just want to know that up front, that if an area received funding in round 1, that area is not going to be eligible for funding. But the applicant that became a grantee in round 1 certainly can come back to us for funding in round 2 for a different area.
There's another question on if you're going to do also a round 2 for the Illinois Connected Communities grant.
Hey, great question. I'll give a preview to everybody who's listening in today. Yeah, watch for that announcement in the next week or two. We're really looking forward to having a second cohort of the Illinois Connected Communities program. So the answer is yes.
Okay. There was another question that was sort of related about the broadband equity category for this round 2 that you just presented, and wondering if it's available to Illinois Connected Communities. And I think the question comes from somebody who's in a current cohort. So if you wanted to just address that quickly.
Yeah, I should just, we have these 2 programs. The Illinois Connected Communities program is designed to help communities, improve their understanding, the lay of the landscape. I think be more informed and sophisticated, brokers on the broadband landscape. And so one of the on-ramps to what's next for an Illinois Connected Community might be looking at an infrastructure grant program. It might be looking at our digital equity programming that will be announced soon. And so to that end, a community that's in one program is certainly, invited to look at the Connect Illinois program. I just want to emphasize everything about the Connect Illinois grant program is focused on infrastructure. And so we have the categories, broadband access, broadband equity, broadband innovation, and urban broadband. Those four categories, all of them are focused on broadband infrastructure. And so we're building and extending networks and connectivity. And so that's what that's about. And if you're going to receive a grant from us through the Connect Illinois grant program, an applicant has to have a strong track record of doing this kind of work. And so we're looking for applicants or partners to an applicant that can do this work.
Okay, there was another question about the census. Somebody had noted that there was poor response using internet in their rural area, and wondering if the areas that have low economic abilities, such as there areas for, per just verbatim what the question's asking, will you use those census response rates to determine exceptions or waivers?
Specifically to the broadband equity category that we've created here for round two, that kind of socioeconomic data, the adoption rates, that kind of information, which will be further clarified in our application packet. That's the kind of argument that in justification that we would be looking for in that broadband equity category for a relaxation on our 50% or more non-state match requirement. And so if I'm understanding the question correctly, that's where that data is applicable in all of our applications, and we want to get the best understanding of how broadband is going to make a difference for a community or a service area across the board. But specific to that broadband equity category, it's really important that an applicant makes a strong case.
Another question asks, they didn't see a requirement associated with Illinois Works apprenticeship program, and wondering if that is in play or not for round two.
It is in play for round two, and I may have glossed over it unintentionally here. I know I did mention it, but let's see. Here we go. Yeah, the Illinois Works Jobs Program, and so this is the requirement. And I have to tell you, these requirements are the same for round two as they were for round one. We do have a little bit, having gone through this process with our grantees, we have a much better understanding of what each one of these entails. We do have a much better understanding of how we're able to work with related state government agency and our grantees to pursue waivers if that's justified in certain cases. And so I just do want to emphasize that these requirements here do not change from round one to round two. The one piece that may change moving forward, though, once we're on the other side of the pandemic and the economy improves and unemployment numbers improve, the Employment of Illinois Workers on Public Works Act may not be stipulated because unemployment rates have recovered. And so that's something just to keep an eye on. But I'll just say, I think at this stage in the game, I think it's a safe assumption that we should expect that to apply for round two grantees as well. Okay, so I hope that makes sense, folks. I apologize if I didn't want to get too in the weeds on these requirements. They're important. I want folks to have a firm understanding of what each entails before you submit an application. And to that end, we are happy to sit down and talk to an applicant or a grantee, as is the case now, in better understanding these and where waivers or exemptions are merited, how to go about that process.
I'm going to put up a quick poll for the participants real quick, but I'm going to keep rolling with the next question. So there was a question about the round one winners, if that's available online. I know for a fact that it is, but I'm not for sure where. Matt, if you can't advise on it, I could probably include the link in the follow-up email if that's something that's appropriate. If people are interested to know, but this person is interested to know also what the average dollar value of those awards were for round one.
Oh, you put me on the spot here. All right, I'm going to have to check my notes on the average. It runs from Yeah, you got me, guys. Sorry. I had this information, but I don't want to misquote it now. And so we ran the gamut. We had awards that were, $50,000. We had awards that were 5 million. And so I think, when you're looking at a service area that you'd like to cover, it's important for us to hone in on that area, make sure that it's eligible for funding. And I think it's up to an applicant, if it's not a fully contiguous area, if it makes sense to include multiple small project areas within one application, or to treat them separately. And so we certainly don't want one application to have um, project areas that are spread all over the state. But I'd certainly keep it to one economic development region, more or less, if that makes sense to folks.
And the second part of that question was how many applicants and how many awardees. I think they just are trying to get an idea of just the slice of applicants
No,
that got an award for round one, and maybe you
right.
can speak to if that's applicable to
Yeah,
or comparable to.
absolutely. Sorry, I missed that. So, and I'll just say this: like, this was all happening during was March and April of 2020, and so we had COVID, and so we did extend our broadband, or we did extend the deadline. We had heard from some folks that they just weren't able to apply in round one because of related, I think, challenges. That being said, we were really happy with round one. High quality of applications. We had 39 applications that came in. 37 of them were deemed eligible and responsive to the NOFO. And of those 37, we were able to fund 28 projects. And those 28 projects include 18 different applicants, 17 providers or rural co-ops, in one local government. And of that $50 million for round one, we leveraged $65 million in non-state match, for a total investment of 115 million associated with broadband for round one, public and private. And we're hoping 26,000 new or improved connections will result because of round one. And so you extrapolate that over multiple rounds, we think that we're off to a good start in terms of the quality of applications, and that's why we're not changing too much from round one to round two here.
And I think that you're on the right slide for the next question. How can we obtain or analyze the data from Illinois Broadband 2020 map to figure out percentages of the population that are unserved versus underserved to use them in our application?
Sure. So we can zoom in on this data, and this is data that is publicly available. So if you have the capacity to do some of this on your own end, you can download the data, and we'd certainly, we can facilitate that. And so we know that it may be an approximation in terms of a project area, and you're able to establish where the premises are, the potential customers within a project area, and then you look at the map, as imperfect as it is, and you are able to look at the unserved versus underserved areas within each. We understand that there's a bit of an art to this, but on the flip side, we would be happy to work through this with an applicant to understand how to get the best possible number. And certainly this kind of dovetails back to the whole conversation about mapping. We know that this map is not perfect. And so if you get any questions regarding eligibility, don't make any assumptions based upon this map alone. Let's have a conversation about that.
Okay, we're about 10 minutes from the 1 o'clock hour. There's several more questions here. Are you willing to take another question before you hop off?
Nancy, I think what you're telling me is we have entered the speed round.
Yeah,
So
okay,
sure,
let's try. Okay.
I'll keep my answers brief.
All right. So concerning the funding round cap being 50 million, and that per project cap being 5 million, if after reviewing all submitted applications there are equally deserving applications on hand but not all can be funded, how do you tie break?
Well, that's why we have the scoring rubric and the approach to scoring that we have. And so we talked a little bit at the outset about, yes, there will be some more detail coming in how we score. And so that's a very thorough process in scoring these applications. We also have, related interest in geographic balance. And so geographic balance by itself could be a tiebreaker, could be. And then we also have those 4 categories of projects that we would like to inspire high quality applications from. And so this was not an issue at all for us in round 1. It was pretty clear which projects were projects to be funded. I expect that that's going to be pretty clear in round 2 as well. When we include some more detail on the scoring in the application packet, hopefully that makes a little bit more sense for potential applicants. If there are follow-up questions about this down the road, we'd be happy to get into some detail about that. But the approach we took in round 1 worked pretty well for us, and so that's what we're going to repeat. And Nancy, I'm sorry, this is the speed round, so I'll be speedy.
Well, I have a question from a mayor now who's wondering how he could verify a third party submitted an application on his municipality's behalf. So that could be a quick answer.
Sure. So what we want to do with this grant program, and we really strived for this in round 1, is to be as transparent as we possibly can. And to my knowledge, we share more with the public on how we go about making decisions and what we're receiving by way of applications and challenges than any program I'm aware of. And I think that that's really important. And so everyone will have an opportunity to know who submitted applications and what the proposed project areas are. Once we receive that, we're going to hustle to put that on our map, likely in early March. And so from that point of view, whether you're a mayor of a community or you're just looking for better broadband in your neck of the woods, you can see what projects have been proposed shortly after the application deadline closes.
Would a community development organization that has never worked in the field of broadband installation apply for this grant to bring broadband to its community?
In that case, I would say find a strong partner that is a provider that's done this work before. The provider doesn't need to be the applicant, but in your application, you want to be able to point to somebody who's done this work, who's got a provider that has a proven track record. And we just can't make a grant unless we know who's doing the work and have a good sense that it's going to be high quality work.
Great. So actually, we finished those questions, and I've put the broadband@illinois.gov email in the chat box as well. If you have additional questions now, you can go ahead and email those to that email address. So I just want to say to everybody, thanks for participating in today's webinar. Thanks, Matt, for coming on to discuss the grant round. And looks like there's plenty of time for people to get organized and try to work on those and submit those. I also want everybody to know that they can go ahead and visit our website if they want to see past webinars or future webinars, and that email address is go.illinois.edu/LGE. I'll be sending a follow-up email today with that URL as well as some URLs that will be useful in regards to Connect to Illinois Broadband Grant Round 2. So thanks again to Matt. And thanks to you all for your interest.
Thanks so much, Nancy. Thanks, everyone.